Karen, a beautiful name and a beautiful song. Another big applause for Santana, please. So I'm going to ask you again, because after this beautiful performance, I imagine that we have a better energy, right? So I'm going to ask you again, how is your energy? Oh, that's better and beautiful. So now, what do we have for the list?
Well, thank you. Thank you for the singers. And I want to thank a very special people or interpreters. Ada Wagner, Maria Perales, Clay de Sauce, Marcela Segre, and Thomas Graham. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And now, we want to ask the members of the International Committee from the World Social Forum to come up here, so everybody can see who you are and can complain to you. And give you positive feedback, let's put it that way. Okay. Give them a round of applause, please. They have been working very hard for the last 2 years. Well, okay. Well, the World Social Forum is one of the thematic processes of the World Social, the World Social Forum, and the World Social Forum is an event. It's a forum that is of and by the social movement, the civil society, and the advocates. And for the first time in the history of the World Social Forum and Migration, the nature of this event as a point of exchange and mutual solidarity among different social movements from around the world has built in the actual agenda. In addition to the plenary session held over 3 days, over the poster session held over the duration of the World Social Forum, at least 48 workshops were held. So that means we have been engaged in a real dialogue and emphasizing our theme of this social forum is mobility, rights, and global matters, looking for alternatives. So thank you to the international community for all the work that you've been doing, and thank you to the Filipino working group, and thank you to Million College for hosting us. Please give them.
Please, another one. Thank again the interpreters, because even when English was the first and the official language for this event, I think that it's important to highlight the fact that we value the concept of multilingual justice, right? And we value the fact that we are able to express our ideas in our own language, so that's beautiful. I also want to say that this World Social Forum on Migration was very unique. The process that we used in all spaces was very inclusive, decentralized, and democratic. We're able to collectively make specific recommendations that are going to help us to arrive to our final conclusions.
Okay.
Now I'm waiting for Jose Luis to see what's going on. What's next?
Well, what is next is we're going to introduce our dear friend Oscar Chacon, that's the Executive Director of NEILA, and he's going to guide us in the process of the declaration, and he's going to give us the guidelines for the dialogue. Oscar, please.
Well, good evening everyone again. I wish that the people that are in the back were to move forward so that we can be closer and be more in family. So I invite you, you don't have to do it, but I would wish that you would do it. So for those of you who do it, thank you in advance. What I've been asked to do is to explain the most important item in the agenda of this plenary, which is to present before you the actual declaration that a few people here, very dedicated, have been working really hard since last night, throughout the day today, and frankly, they just finished, literally, about 10 minutes ago, trying to wrap up the contents of the declaration that we will present to you. But what I am in charge of explaining is how did we get to this document. Because in reality, we have experienced an important qualitative change in the way this particular social forum has been conducted. In previous years, there were lots of workshops, there were lots of seminars that were held throughout the days of the forum, but we did not necessarily invested much time in ensuring that in particular the workshops that were held were actually mini assemblies of representatives of multiple movements that are represented in this social forum. That is in reality the new approach that this forum has actually injected in the way the conversations have happened. We probably should have explained this from the very first moment when we inaugurated the forum, but I think this is a great time for us to reflect about the fact that every one of you who participated in a workshop was actually participating in a meaningful, deep, detailed, democratic, decentralized conversation. Can you raise your hand if you were actually in one of the workshops? Can you raise your hand if you participated in a workshop? So most of us participated in a workshop. And you probably noticed that there were two people in each workshop working really hard, taking notes, and at the end, people were asked to actually come up with 3 recommendations. In each of the 48 workshops that were held, recommendations were generated. Those recommendations made the basis for the document that we are about to present to you. And in doing so, we are essentially recognizing the workshops as a qualitative manner of actually getting all of you who participated in a workshop engaged, participating in the essence of what the World Social Forum is about, which is a debate about not only problems, but also solutions and proposals, which is exactly what came up in the context of the recommendations that were made. So in previous years, we devoted at the end of the forum a lot of time, to what has been known as the Assembly of Social Movements. But without telling you so, we already had the assembly, except that each assembly was happening every time that you participated in a workshop and took responsibility to actually come up with recommendations. So we are indeed going to have an opportunity after we present the document to you, for those of you who feel that there is something that still needs to be added, to do so. But I also want to tell you, the document that we are about to present is not a 40-page document. It's about a 5-page document, if I am correct. And it is really a political statement that tries to summarize in an orderly manner the deliberations that we have been having for the past 3 days of workshops. But there will be 2 other documents that we will not read to you today, but that will be available, through the website. One is an executive summary of all the recommendations that have emanated from the workshops that you participated. And then there is a second document, which is a much more detailed document, listing not only the recommendations, but a lot of the actual conversations that took place in the workshops. So these 2 documents I'm referring to actually contemplate many of the very specific recommendations that were made in the context of the workshops. So in case you are wondering where is my recommendation, because I don't see it in the document that I just saw, I invite you to just be patient and take my word for granted. I mean that every single recommendation has been very diligently recorded. And I actually would like to ask for a tremendous applause for the people who did all that work, which is unbelievably incredible. I think that the Philippine working group did a fantastic job dedicating talented, dedicated people to that task. And I can tell you, I mean, I've been in every single World Social Forum on Migration before, from the one in Porto Alegre to the last one that we had in Quito, and we just never had that level of high dedication to the task of providing synthesis from every single workshop. That's qualitative work. So I'd like to turn back the mic to the people that have been asked by the International Committee to actually read to you the document that we will also be showing in the screen. As far as I know, it's ready to be projected as well. And the two people that will be sharing the actual reading of this document are Patricia Gainza from Espacios Sin Fronteras, a network in South America, and on behalf of the Filipino Working Group, Rex Barona. So I leave you with the two of them who are going to be presenting. And after that, I have also been charged with facilitating the actual interaction between this declaration that is being presented to you and every one of you who may still feel that there is something that needs to be said, but I warn you ahead of time. And I've been actually congratulated several times for the sharing I did yesterday of the plenary that I was responsible to share yesterday. I want to make sure that we keep this exchange live, that we keep it short, that we keep it concise, and that most of all, that it keep us moving forward. So I will definitely be grateful for your collaboration in making sure that we have a very good session in terms of questions and answers, recommendations, but that we keep it sweet, we keep it brief, we keep it concise, so that we can party somewhat afterwards. So in advance, thank you. Patricia, is it you or is it Rex who begins? Patricia? Okay, do we have a mic for you? Okay. There are plenty of mics. Okay, very good.
Rex? Let's go.
Sorry to leave behind my partner.
Mobility rights, global model, looking for alternatives. Manila Declaration, 29 November to 20. We are more than 1,800 overseas and local delegates coming from over 50 countries worldwide, where there is an assembly of social movement and the 5th World Social Forum on Migration, held on 26 30 November 2012 in Quezon City, Metro Manila, Philippines. More than half of the delegates are women, and many come from immigrants, workers, peasants, and other grassroots groups. We are joined by over 6,000 more workers, migrants, and dependents from communities. Yet a student in public action and cultural event during the 5th World Social Forum on Migration. The 5th Forum is a milestone in our journey together as social movements. Why? Because this year our recommendation for a better world directly incorporate the input of participants from each of the 4 days of workshops. Daily plenaries allow us to explore complex themes and lead us to multifaceted recommendations. We achieved another milestone with the interlink of the migrant and social movement in Asia and throughout the world. Refugees, anti-trafficking, workers, peasant women, fight basic environmental justice, indigenous people, domestic workers, trade and development, anti-racism, and human advocates. This convergence is necessary because by ourselves and separated, we cannot change the current economic model that exploits migrants. The participation from all regions of the world allow us to see the global nature of migrant and labor class struggles and provided impulse for collective strategic action.
The succeeding 4 pages actually follow the format of the sub-themes that are in your program. So that's how we consolidated the different topics so that it logically flows from how the program was formulated. So on the first section, on crises, critique on consequences of neoliberal globalization, the migration and labor question. 1. Like never before, we are facing a humanitarian crisis that threatens civilization. The current international scene is undergoing a profound, multidimensional, financial, overproduction, environmental, and global social crisis. 2. This crisis is a consequence of a strategy of imperialist domination led by multinational corporations in search of low-cost and flexible labor, as well as natural resources from the global south. 3. The rules of neoliberal globalization persist. Outsourcing, subcontracting, importing temporary labor is the new mantra for capital to secure its profits. The costs are increasingly borne by families, workers, and our environment. Those with privilege and power are the minority, yet they continue to benefit unfairly. Number 4, a main engine of neoliberal globalization is the lowering of labor costs by any and all means, and the exacerbation of uneven development as well as social inequalities. 5, in this context, decent jobs are rapidly giving way to a low-wage, precarious employment economy. The resulting massive oversupply of labor and widespread uneven development magnifies the pressure for people to emigrate internally and or internationally under conditions of extreme vulnerability. 6, women make up half of global migration flows. Their lives, their bodies, their minds are deeply impacted. 7, human and sex trafficking has become tragically more widespread around the world. 8, 90% of migrants are workers. The migration and labor questions are two sides of the same coin, whose currency translates into unbearable conditions of systemic oppression against the working class promoted by neoliberal globalization and its current profound and multidimensional crisis. 9, the root causes behind why people are forced to move continue to be overlooked by governments and international agencies that profit from the current neoliberal model.
Migrant rights are human rights. 10. Compelled by the need to simple life, large segments of the world are being forced to migrate. 11. It is disproportionately human, children, ethnic groups, racial minorities, asylum seekers, climate displacement communities, and people of diverse sexual orientation and gender identities who are in situation of forced migration. They endure multiple risks and vulnerabilities. They are too often permanently exposed to labor insecurity, precarious citizenship, undocumented status, criminalization, discrimination, marginalization, and social exclusion. 12. Too often, in managing migration, governments of residing countries resort to repressive measures, border militarization, persecution, deportation, and other forms of violence against immigrants, especially against women. 13. Safeguarding human rights is still a pending issue for all governments in countries of origin, transit, and destination. No nation is exempt from this responsibility. 14. Too many countries of origin and for transit use a double standard. Governments denounce violations to the right of their citizens in destination country while the rights of migrants in their own lands are systematically violated. 15. Although migrants have some legal protections, such as the 1990 International Convention of the Protection of the Right of All Migrant Workers and Members of their Family and ILO instrument, these tools remain unratified by major receiving countries and implementation measures remaining a distant reality. 16. It becomes, I don't know how I'll arrive to the end, it's become even more imperative to support in every possible way the organizing process of and by migrant community. The best way to ensure that migrant workers and community are prepared to defend themselves and to conquest new victories in their struggles for the respect of all their rights is by ensuring a steady and ever stronger organizing capacity that allows them to become more effective when it comes to impact all policy areas that are affecting their life. A leader of the domestic worker movement said it very eloquently: nothing about us should be decided without us. The organizing capacity of migrant communities must be supported.
17. We reassert the Wsfm Declaration from Quito that calls on the right to free and unconditional movement and settlement that may be advanced through the concept of universal citizenship. Topic number 3, reimagining migration, proposing alternatives. 18. The relationship between migration and development is a topic of growing interest among the international organizations, academics, and some civil society organizations. National governments and international organizations such as the World Bank and the IOM and the GFMD have narrowly and wrongly focused attention on remittances and migration management as contributing to development. 19. This perspective, I just checked if the amendment is there. Yeah, there was a slight amendment in number 18. Number 19. This perspective overlooks historic forces of unequal development in which contemporary migration is embedded. It conveniently disregards human and labor rights as central and intrinsic elements of coherent migration and development policies. It masks fundamental contributions made by migrants to the destination countries and ignores the cost of migration for the countries of origin and the burden that is borne on sending communities, costs that are far greater than positive impacts of remittances to sending countries. 20. In line with the corporate restructuring strategy underlying neoliberal globalization, mainstream migration policies follow similar patterns. They essentially are corporate-driven public policies. Temporary or guest worker programs is a prime example. Dubious terms like circular migration are equally suspect. What is clear is these programs and terms favor corporate elites primarily in receiving countries. 21. These policies rationalize a new form of slavery. The last area, struggle, organization, and action. We changed the title to struggle instead of resistance because we thought this is more proactive and reflects more our capacity. 22. The pursuit for sustainable human development is a process of social emancipation through collective participation and popular empowerment. 23. Social transformation capable of fueling a counter-hegemonic social power is urgently needed. Our collective knowledge and experience in concert with the working class and social movements and organizations must be united. It is time for direct democracy. This means democratizing access to power, encouraging social organization, and promoting instruments of participation.
25. A symbiotic relationship between people and nature, one that goes beyond radical conservationism, should be encouraged. The right of nature should be promoted alongside human rights, and the stewardship and responsibility of governments to this must be upheld. 26. A strategy for sustainable human development requires social control of foreign investment, equitable and fair trade, scientific and technological development, and the elimination of all of an equal exchange and surplus transfer. 27. Labor sovereignty is essential in promoting decent work and wages, occupational safety and health, and universal social security. 28. There must be a radical change in the dominant paradigm in order to grant precedence to human rights across economic, labor, social, political, and cultural realms. We will continue to broaden our alliance and solidarity with other social movements in our common struggle for social transformation. 29. Towards this end, we call up the upcoming UN high-level dialogue on migration and development to adhere to a 5-year action plan that advances protection of the human rights of migrants and links to a post-2015 development agenda that affirms the right to migrate and remain at home with decent work and human security. 30. Finally, the right not to emigrate should be in place in the countries of origin. This implies creating the necessary human development conditions that transform migration into a choice rather than a necessity.
Thank you so much for that presentation.
Well, I want to thank again the people who were putting together this statement. I believe they were Rex, Patricia, Raúl Delgado Weiss, and was there anybody else in the writing team? Well, William, of course, helped out with the writing, and it meant a lot of work in the last 24 hours up until about an hour and a half that they were still incorporating elements coming out of the workshops that were held actually today. I remind you, there were 2 different types of activities that we held. We had the posters activities, which were meant to be serious conversations, but not to the level of depth that the actual workshops had, just by virtue of the amount of time devoted to the workshops. And then we had the workshops. And the workshops were intended to be a much more intensive, deep, qualitative form of engaging you all who participated in the workshops. And the insistence on having the recommendations come out is because we wanted to take those recommendations and turn them into the statement that you just saw, that we just read to you. Now, with that said, I mean, there are, of course, as I mentioned before, lots of very specific recommendations, even actions that came out in the context of the workshops. So if you didn't see your action mentioned in this statement, it's because this is not a statement of the actions to be taken. Instead, it's a statement that tries, to the best of our capacity, to synthesize and translate all those recommendations into the kind of political statement that we just presented. So with that said, I'd like to invite you who may have very concrete suggestions, additions, recommendations to be added, to be considered as modifications to the document, to please make use of the mics that are actually in both of the aisles of the auditorium. I ask in advance, make sure that you think carefully before you come to the mic, in as far as being brief, concrete, and as specific as possible in terms of the suggestions that you would like to make. So, who's gonna go first? Is everybody so tired that you don't have any opinions? Or you just want to get out of here and go have a party? Okay, anybody here? Oh, please come forward.